Okay, so this is going to be a short little video explaining these carburetors a little bit. Just going over some of the basics here. Kind of doing this mainly in part for someone on a lawnmower farm, but hopefully it'll be educational for anyone else watching on YouTube or on the farm. So these carburetors and these fuel tanks were used on 4 and 5 horsepower motors. I don't know if they use them on anything bigger than 5. But I've seen them on 4 and 5 horsepower motors, Briggs and Stratton, from the late 60s, maybe earlier, through the 90s, early 90s at least. So they were around a lot of years, and there's a few part numbers for the carburetors, but they basically the same carburetor for the most part. Changed very few things. So basically, there's our carburetor on the tank. And so behind here is your diaphragm. Your pump diaphragm is going to be behind there, behind that cover with the screws. And I've got a couple other ones here. So both of these have got the covers taken off. And here's the cover that goes on there. And I just had it here, and now I've misplaced it. The diaphragm. It's right here. This old diaphragm is really old. This one came out of that carburetor there. And this is the original one because you can see it's still got the orange paint. And it's all hard and cracking and stiff. You don't want these to be all stiff like that. They're supposed to be nice and soft. These flaps get hard and stiff, and then they don't seal right on the little ports there. So your diaphragm goes on. Well, so then you have your spring. So you want to show this because sometimes people put these in wrong. Your spring goes in there, and then your little washer cap goes on top like that, and then your diaphragm, and then your cover, basically. Now, sometimes on these, the throttle shafts wore out on them, which is pretty common. So this one here is a little wore. I don't know if you can see that. I'm moving it side to side. It actually is wore, but you know, the motor that this was on was running, and it's not really that bad. This one here, that one there's a little wore too, but not bad. Now, what happens with these is they get really wore, and then you suck air in through the shaft, and that messes with your fuel mixture a little bit sometimes if they're really wore out, but that's on extreme cases. Now, there's not really too many ways of fixing that other than if you were to ream this out, put a bushing in there, but I've never done that. I don't know if I've seen anyone do that. I'm sure it can be done, but I'm going to try it one of these days. Sorry about the airplane there. So here's another shaft out of one of these ones. Now this one here, the shaft is actually wore a little bit. If the camera will focus. The shaft itself is wore, so sometimes it may be just the bushing, the actual carburetor itself is wore, or it's just the brass on the shaft. If it's just the brass on the shaft, so like this one here actually came out of this carburetor. And I was actually able to get away with taking the shaft out of one of these other carburetors and putting it near. It was not as wore out, and it took up some of the slack. So that is one way of fixing it if you have a spare carburetor and you can swap parts around. But that's really one of the only ways. And then your fuel mixture jet, the screw there. You're going to want to see where did I put the other one. Here it is. You're going to want to take it off with the wrench here. I would not recommend pulling the screw all the way out. You can back it up, but I would not take it all the way out, because in my experience, when I tried to put them back in my put them back in, I would always cross thread them, and you don't want to do that. So you just want to back it out as far as you can without taking it out, or back it out and then take a wrench and take this out. And when you put it back in, you're going to want to make sure that the screw is screwed pretty far out, at least not in all the way, or else when you go to put it back in, you're going to squish it, which you don't want to do. And then also there's that little brass insert down there. One of these ones I have loose. Take with a flathead screwdriver. Well, they're both snug right now. I'm trying to do it with my left hand. There you go. That brass insert comes out. Well, should come out. Now, on this other carburetor here, it's actually stuck in there. I've never been able to get it out. But if you're going to be like cleaning these, like with carb cleaner spray or whatever, you're going to want to try to take these out if you can. And these come out, you can spray through there and then clean in there. And that's kind of the basics of these. Oh, the carb base. So like on this one, I don't know if you can tell, but it's a little bit warped. Kind of slants to the left a little bit. I don't know how the camera's going to pick that up. Same with this one, a little bit. Kind of higher in the center. It's kind of hard to tell. This one here you can tell, at least I can, on this one. See how the left and right corners are down? Specifically the left corner is down from the center. Now sometimes that may or may not be an issue. It just depends. And then your base gasket goes between the carburetor and the fuel tank. Sometimes, so I've heard of people putting two of these, stacking two of them together. If the carburetor is badly warped, stack them to thicken it up a little bit so it has more, takes up the gap. But, I've had another one of these that was slightly warped, and I put it back together, and it seemed fine. You really won't know until you actually go to put it on, and if it leaks, and if it, it's with these, it's kind of just a trial and error kind of thing. If it works, it works, and if it doesn't, then you gotta sort it out. You won't know till you try it, sort of thing. So that's kind of on these. Only other thing is your O-ring, or some of them weren't really an O-ring, but they were a gasket, and then later on they have an O-ring. And here, for your intake. Sometimes, if you're going to rebuild the complete carburetor, I'd recommend replacing those, unless it still feels soft. But sometimes they get really hard and brittle, and at that point, you're going to want to replace them. So I'll link part numbers to parts down in the description of the video for the parts for these, just because that way make it easier, helpful for everyone who are looking for parts for these. One other quick thing, sometimes these tabs break off on the choke. Most of the time it's not an issue. Well, it'll be an issue if it's like broken off really bad. Like this one here is like completely broke off, but even then you can sometimes bend this tab down here to push on it to close it off. You can adjust that, bend that tab with pliers or whatever. So, well, kind of basic video, not 100% detailed, but I hope it helps someone out there. Thanks for watching.